I love reading, and it's always fun to share some of the best things I've read this year. Engineering in Plain Sight by Grady Hillhouse. It's about the physical world. The environment we live in, there's an electrical network, there's a water network, there's a cable TV network, there's a mobile phone network, there's natural gas being distributed to houses. And it's all kind of miraculous stuff, but you can either just ignore it, or I think it's kind of fun to understand, okay, what is that? Why is it done that particular way? I think this thing is fantastic. This is a really good book. The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It's kind of a scary book, but very convincing. He writes about the rise of mental illness and anxiety in children. He, unlike some books, actually has some prescriptions, like kids not using phones until much later, parenting style differences. I think it's a super important book. The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleiman. Of all the books on AI, that's the one I recommend. The most. The book is very good, particularly at explaining what's different. He frames that countries compete with countries and companies compete with companies and individuals compete for attention. And he talks about how those dynamics mean that now that this thing has started, that the amount of resources going into it are unprecedented. Anyway, so he has some really good vignettes in there, and he says we have to contain it. That is, not let bad guys have versions of this that let them do things like bioterrorism, nuclear weapons, cyber. Bad guys have versions of this that let them do things like bioterrorism, nuclear weapons, cyber attacks. And other than not solving the problem, it's a really good book. An Unfinished Love Story by Doris Kearns Goodwin. It's a story about Lyndon Johnson. But I found the book surprisingly timely. It's a sad story because the main thing people remember about LBJ is not Great Society's programs and racial progress, but rather Vietnam. You know, I don't know for people in their 30s how they think about the 60s. That was kind of a crazy time. I think she paints the picture pretty well. I really enjoyed all these books, and I think you would like them too.